MCSS, Rabia Somers and Vanessa Didon. And they'll be talking to us today about Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. Vanessa and Rabia are co-workers at the Marine Conservation Society Seychelles. It's an NGO which aims to promote conservation of the marine environment through education and research programs. Vanessa has been working for MCSS for 7 years, mainly as a sea turtle conservationist, and has been the project leader for the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas project since 2015. Rabbia is MCSS's Scientific Coordinator and working together with Vanessa on establishing the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. So I'll hand over to you two and you can talk to us about some turtles.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Kelly, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to speak about the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. All right, so yeah, we'll be speaking to you all a bit about the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas that we are currently working to establish and implement. So I'll just start off with a bit of background context on MCSS as well as the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. And then Vanessa will go into a bit more of the monitoring and some of the results that basically justify the rationale behind designating these areas. And then I'll speak a bit more about the selection and designation of the TPAs, which we might refer to them as temporal protected areas. So TPAs, just to make that clear now. All right, so a bit of background on MCSS. We're an environmental NGO that was founded in Seychelles in 1997. Our aims are to improve the conservation of marine and coastal ecosystems through scientific, management, and educational programs. Our strategic areas are marine megafauna, under which the Turtle project falls under, marine and coastal ecosystems, as well as advocacy and outreach. We are a small team of full-time staff responsible for the implementation of our monitoring programs and grant-funded projects, and we are largely assisted by interns and volunteers. So to just give some background on MCSS's turtle conservation work over the years, we have been monitoring sea turtle nesting activity on beaches around Mahe since 2004. In between 2003 and 2005, we ran a project which saw the protection of nesting turtles on As Etadas, which basically entailed the training of banyan tree staff in monitoring, as well as beach vegetation restoration. From 2003 to 2006, we looked at the strategic management of turtle populations, which included the development of an online database, the engagement of various, I believe, 17 monitoring partners, as well as the development of a Turtle Watchers Code of Conduct. From between 2009 and 2010, we ran a turtle satellite tagging program in which 3 hawksbills were tagged. 2 of these were later seen to be poached locally, and 1 made it all the way to Madagascar. Again, between 2009 and 2010, we had a community-based turtle monitoring program, which saw the engagement of 4 community monitoring groups. And between 2010 and 2012, the conservation of marine biodiversity through a multi-species acoustic tracking array, which was in BTN, and that included sea turtles. Between 2011 and 2016, we were partners to the Strengthening Seychelles Protected Area System through NGO management modalities. And this is essentially when the concept of the temporal protected areas was developed under this project. In 2014 is when we submitted the initial nomination file to nominate the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. A bit on that later. And then in 2015, we saw the establishment of the Wildlife Conservation and Rehabilitation Center at the Banyan Tree at Etadas in the south of Mahe. And this was the first and only veterinary and rehabilitation facility for wildlife in Seychelles, and also had the only veterinary X-ray machine. So between 2014 and 2020, we ran a program overseeing the management of turtle and human interactions, turtle rehabilitation, and guest and school group sensitization at us from the Wildlife Conservation and Rehabilitation Center. And between 2016 and 2020, as part of the Protected Area Sustainable Financing Project, we hope to see the implementation of the Turtle Temporal Protected Areas. However, there were some gaps in terms of the legislation, which I'll get into later, that unfortunately didn't see that happening. And that brings us to where we are now. So just to recap some achievements that we've had over this time. We've recorded a decreased number of poaching incidences. This is generally, there are some anomalies, certain years where there are some spikes. Increased awareness through our educational programs. We use drones to facilitate surveys and monitoring. We see the clearing of natural debris to provide more nesting space and increased successful nesting, particularly in relation to relocated nests, as well as the resighting of turtles between nesting seasons through photo identification. Okay, so Vanessa will speak to you about turtle monitoring.
All right, hi everyone. So for the turtle monitoring side of things, since 2004, since the beginning of the turtle monitoring program, MCSS conducts patrols throughout the year. It's just the frequency of the patrols that changes. So as you can see, for example, from October to January, which is like the peak of the hawksbill nesting season. So this is where we would be patrolling 3 times a week at the minimum. So this is a map of Mahe, as you can see, and we have 14 beaches highlighted on there, which are the 14 beaches that MCSS patrols in general. Okay, so here we have a graph showing the emergences in nest, total emergencies in nest recorded over a few seasons. So as you can see, there are high and lows between the season, which is, we find it to be quite common. So one season is quite high and then you go down a bit. But as you can all spot, for the 2017 to 2018 season, this was a remarkably low season where we recorded less than 100 nests. So that was a very low one for us. So when it comes to disturbances for the turtles, basically, so these are mainly caused by humans and dogs. So on this graph, we have, we can see total human-induced nesting failures. So basically, this would be, we could have like a turtle emerging from the sea, but then being frightened off by humans, or sometimes even disturbed while they are digging their egg chambers and so on. But for some reason, well, humans being the reason, this would put them off and would turn them back to sea. We have poaching incidents, again by humans, and we also have dogs, which they would either be destroying the nest, digging up the nest, destroying the eggs, or we've had situations, even fatal situations, where dogs would be disturbing a nesting turtle. So as the turtle is on the beach nesting, the turtles would attack the females as well. So following slides will be a series of a few graphs that we've put together, basically showing the few past seasons. What we want to highlight is that, as you can see, starting from Grand Police to Intendance, firstly on the graphs, you will notice that there is an intensified number of patrols and emergencies, being tracks and emergency encounters, recorded. So if I just go through the next few slides, you will see that this is still apparent for the 6 first beaches, which are the 6 nominated beaches for the TPA. So the results shows for itself, hence the nomination of these beaches, because they have a more number of emergencies or nests or basically sea turtle activities happening on these beaches. So these are the reasons why they've been chosen as the TPAs. Okay, if I move on to the next few slides now, I'll be showing you a few tables that we've put together. So this is basically showing you the number of nests, the number of emergences, and the nesting success for each of the 14 beaches that MCSS monitors. So basically, when you look at the nesting success, this is in line with the number of emergences that you have and the number of times that the turtle actually or successfully lays. So this is how we calculate the percentage. For example, if you look down at Anse-Louis before last, you will see 100% nesting success, but that doesn't mean that it's generally much better than the other beaches. It's just for the fact that with the one emergence that was recorded, that turtle did manage to lay. So this is what will give you 100% nesting success. So I'll just go through a few other seasons for you to see. Yeah, of course, you can come back to these tables after I'm sure you'll get a copy of our presentations and you can have a better look, but I just wanted to explain that how we really get the nesting success. Okay, for example, on this one, we have the two beaches with 0%. So basically we didn't have any emergencies there and of course, no nest. Okay, so for this one, basically the previous presentations or slides or information were basically about hawksbill turtles, but we also have another species nesting on our beaches, and these are the green turtles. So we've noticed that the green turtles are actually nesting on 5 out of the 6 nominated TPAs, with the exception of Anse-Corail. But I just wanted to point out, though, even if we're saying the exception of Anse-Corail, we have, in fact, recorded green turtle tracks on Anse-Corail, but it's just the fact that the graph is showing you the number of nests that were recorded. So even if we had a few tracks on Anse-Corail, she did not lay. But just to highlight that it is still being used. So generally, you would say that all the nominated TPAs are being frequented by green turtles as well. Okay. I'll pass you back on to Rabbia.
Thank you. Okay, so just to give some background information on the various TPA sites that we've been talking about, there are 5 sites, which is composed of 6 nesting beaches, actually, including the beach crest vegetation area and the nearshore marine areas. So they are Anse Grand Police, Anse Bazaka, Anse Etanos, Anse Petit Police, and then together the 2 small adjacent beaches, Anse Corail and Anse Caché, form one of the 5 TPA sites. So here's a map showing the various sites on the northernmost beach being Etanos, moving southwards being Anse Caché and Anse Corail, forming one site, as you can see. Next, Anse Bazaka, then Anse Petit Police, and right down in the south, Anse Grand Police. And this map also indicates the entire boundary delineation, which includes the nesting platform, the beach, and the nearshore marine area. Okay, so about the TPA sites, the 5 nominated sites in the south of Mahé are nominated as such because of the fact that they are important nesting grounds for hawksbill turtles, particularly during the months of October to April each year, as well as to a limited degree green turtles, which nest throughout the year. The southern part of the island is the least disturbed in regards to development as well as population density, which is likely the reason that turtles still use this area as nesting grounds as opposed to other beaches around the island. These habitats also contain suitable nesting vegetation, which is becoming increasingly rare around Mahé due to significant coastal development. And so protecting these last remaining suitable habitats on Mahé, where there is already considerably less development, is likely to be the only way to ensure sustained presence of nesting turtles on the island. So in terms of the selection and delineation of the TPA sites, further to the selection of nesting sites as the priority habitat to protect, which Vanessa just ran through, There was also a Turtle TPA beach selection criteria matrix that was developed, which was based on the analysis and comparison of each priority beach's turtle activity rank versus the rank of levels of the various threats that is faced at each of these beaches. And so the activity and threat ranks were then added together, and the overall score was ranked to provide a quantifiable and objective method for the specific beach selection. Nest GPS locations are digitized from previous seasons' data, and this is the information that's used to identify the boundary on the landward side of the TPA zone. And to delineate the nearshore area, a distance band from the coast of 150 meters is applied using GIS software. Okay, so some of the rationale for the designation of the TPAs is to provide protection for critically endangered hawksbills, as Seychelles hosts one of the 5 largest remaining populations, to reduce the incidence of poaching because the area is quite secluded and remote, the mitigation of dog disturbances, which, as Vanessa has already touched on, poses quite a threat to nesting turtles, the protection and management of the beach crest vegetation to ensure their continued suitability for nesting turtles, to provide recreational and educational opportunities, economic benefits in the form of visitors and the associated job opportunities that come along with that, and of course to preserve the natural heritage for future generations and visitors to Seychelles. So in terms of the next steps for the temporal protected areas, the establishment and implementation of the Turtle TPAs is now a component under the National Ridge to Reef project, which will be running from 2020 to 2025. And so along with that, coming back to the legislation, the previous legislation, which Helena mentioned, the National Parks and Nature Conservancy Act, didn't make provision for seasonally protected areas, whereas the Nature Reserves and Conservancy Act, well, currently a bill, once it's enacted, will make provision for this, for the designation of seasonally protected areas. So once this legislation comes into force, we will then be finalizing the update and the resubmission of the Turtle Temporal Protected Area nomination file, which will be followed by the gazetting of the TPAs. And following that, we will see the development of the TPA regulations as well as the management plans for each site, followed by the reduction of threats once we are authorized to essentially reduce these threats at these sites. And then, as always, as we have been doing and will continue to do so, we will be looking at the sensitization and education, monitoring, control, and surveillance, as well as the rehabilitation of degraded nesting habitats and targeted research. Thank you. We welcome any questions.
Great, thank you very much. That was great, very interesting. I particularly like the priority ranking, the matrix, and the activity and threat rank. I think that's quite interesting to know. You know, in terms of how that influences beach selection and stuff. That's great. And also just looking at the nesting platforms and coastal erosion and thinking about the impact that might have. So we have some questions. People seem to be very interested about the dogs, and they want to know whether the dogs are stray or feral, and do you think, I mean, feral or pet dogs, and do you think that there's any way to control them in TPAs?
Most of the dogs that we are having issues with, these are mostly stray dogs. In the past, a couple of times we've liaised with the local vets to do some how do you say? Neutering, yeah, to have this activity. But the fact remains that these stray dogs are still around, and they are increasing their population. So it's becoming quite alarming. But we've been discussing that there is the new dog act, so we might be able to work with something under that act. Yeah.
And then of course this can also be addressed in the regulations and the management plans for the area in terms of controlling dogs in the TPAs.
And then one last question, and then I think any others can send direct messages to them. Somebody just asked about the fact that you mentioned less development and secluded sites being advantageous to nesting rates. But could you comment specifically on why Untitled had significantly lower success rates compared to the other sites? So they want to know about Untitled and why it only had 33% compared to other sites. Do you have any more information on why maybe Untitled is lower?
Well, I mean, just to clarify that Untitled would not be included in the beaches that we refer to as having significantly less development. It's not one of the TPAs. I would say there is some significant development all along that beach. Yeah, which is also somewhat reduced, I would say, the nesting platform. Erosion has been quite an issue there.
Yeah, we have a lot of issues with erosion, and you know, monitoring 14 beaches in total, it's not a very easy task. And as we are trying to work mostly with the TPA sites, so our efforts are more intensified on those beaches, but we do work with a few of the people in the local community of Untitled as well, who reports to us promptly whenever they have sightings of turtles and so on. But yeah, generally, like the success rate, I have to say, we do get more emergencies on the TPA sites itself. So that is from Etadans to Grand Police area. So that would explain, like I was saying previously in the presentation, why you would have a less or a lower rate percentage of success rate for nesting, because you're not having that many emergencies there as well.
All right, great. Thank you very much. That was very interesting.